Hello, today I wanted to talk about truth and deception in particular. I wanted to talk about, and not so much even lies, but just deception as an opposer, a way for truth to be covered. And I want to talk about our ultimate cause for the effect that we find ourselves in, as part of the effect that we find ourselves in, and in this time frame. We are part of a greater universe in our solar system and on our Earth, and we find ourselves at this point in history, and it's really a truly fascinating time. I'm inspired to think about this all the more. This kind of thing is always really very fascinating, and of massive importance to me, and I think it affects all of us, even if we don't think about it. But we do get caught up in the day-to-day. We don't always think about these things. But part of what has put it on the front burner in my mind right now is that these discussions that are taking place started back, I think, in June of 2018 with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, Bret Weinstein, and Douglas Murray. The last two are the moderators, the crowds that gathered, and that they took place in Vancouver first, the first two, and then Dublin in Ireland. And it's absolutely fascinating to me the further I dig in, and concerning all at the same time. And just interesting, which goes with the fascinating, but intriguing, and strikes a chord on multiple levels. And anyway, so let's just jump right in. The reason why I want to talk about truth more in reality is that what I find, and just in rewatching the first video, the first discussion, if you watch the whole thing again, or if you even just watch the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes, where they kind of lay it out and wrap it back up, what I feel like is really happening is that we're really dancing around what actually is, and we see so much reflected, and we've got some conflict of thought, and there's a reason why I may even talk again about a portion of just Bret's comments in the beginning, Bret Weinstein's comments, but I just want to say this at the outset, that we can't help but dance around what actually is in the universe. We don't even have to ever apprehend it fully before we die. We don't have to absolutely acknowledge it before we die. Bear with me, for that thing to be an actual thing. So we get caught up, and I think these are the biggest things of the universe, and in terms of the ideas and what actually is. But what is not able to be helped, that this is be put at such a forefront, is that we are getting closer, or supposedly trying to get closer to what actually is. So set that aside for just the moment in like a little area. In the meantime, I don't think anyone in these discussions would disagree that there is evil in the world. It's an actual thing that is there. Literally, no denying that there's evil, great moral evil. In talking about what actually is as the source or the cause for all that we see and know, and considering that I think we're kind of all on the same page for the most part, that there is no denying that there is absolute good, just that we are alive. Well, that's a good thing, but that's not necessarily the sense in which I'm speaking of good here. There is a definite morality. We are all in ownership of that in our beings. We know intuitively most, well, I say most, all of us, but the most, for most all, everybody, there is a sense within us that there is a thing that a person could ever do wrong to us, right? We would object. And not just because we wouldn't prefer the thing. There are things that could be done to you that or I or anybody that we would object to because it's actually wrong. So these things matter. The reason why, so what I'm getting at here, in part at least, see, I'm kind of dancing around this whole thing too a little bit. In a good way, I mean, about what the truth and reality and the cause. Because what is the cause? Whatever is the cause, rather, would be the true moral arbiter of these truths. Now, I know that some might disagree with that, but I don't see how it can be escaped. I do think also with all of the deceptions, we see deceptions being utilized quite a bit in all facets of life, including in politics and philosophies or just ways of thinking. In part, sometimes with people wanting to hurt others, we see intentional deceptions. But I think there are a lot of deceptions put out there that could be part and parcel of the evil that is going on. And I don't want to get too much into like what that looks like, as much as that it might be happening. I think evil would very much like the thing that is the good. So if good can be a demolisher of evil, wouldn't evil want the good to be disguised, right? So I just wanted to say that. And at the risk of sounding and putting it at this point in this talk, I get how that might come across. I get how that might sound, but you'll have to just bear with me for a minute as a point. For instance, if there's something true, for instance, think about when you're a little kid. So I don't know, somebody doing like a white lie or some kind of a deception or a lie. But sometimes it's actually never really easy to pull off deceptions and lies, is it? Not really. When you've got a bright light shining on things or whatever, the truth of things, it tends to quell the lies or the deceptions. My point there only is that deception can get creative. Deception and evil, people that engage in doing some dark types of things might really engage in getting creative. No, I'm not I'm not at this, and certainly not at this point. I'm not like in a sideways accusing that of happening here. I'm speaking very much in general here at this point. But the reason why it matters in part is it's the beginning of this discussion in Vancouver. So the Vancouver 1 discussion. Bret's talking about some really interesting things, and I actually wrote down something that he said, and it's going to be quite the long quote, and I think that I got it correct. If there is literally like one tiny word off here and there, please just forgive me. I'm saying in advance. This is my attempt at handwriting a quote of Bret's at the beginning. Okay, so people, are coming into the room. His opening comments. So he starts off literally saying just, wow, that's all right. That's daunting, because the crowd's just going crazy. Gosh, and I would be too. If I was there, I would be very excited to be a part of this discussion. And Bret says, so I hope you will indulge me, or I hope you'll indulge me here a second. Jordan and Sam have given me the honor of moderating this debate or discussion, depending on how you view it, and I think that actually creates a certain kind of responsibility. Interesting. A certain kind of responsibility, and I want to talk to you about my responsibility and how I see it, and my sense of how you all have a responsibility. in this as well. I suspect that what's going to happen tonight is actually historical, which doesn't necessarily make it good. There's a lot of bad history. And then there's a lot of applause and laughing there. And Bret Weinstein continues, it could be good though. And that's what I'm hoping will happen. So the reason I say I think it's historical is that we are existing in a moment where all of the systems that have helped us make sense are breaking down. University systems are breaking down. Journalism is breaking down. And then there's huge applause there again. Maybe not huge, but applause. Bret continues. And at that same moment, we have a network of people who are trying to make sense in an alternative way, and I have to say, beating the odds for the moment. So here's the problem. That network is not entirely in agreement with itself about some significant issues, and Sam and Jordan have some differences that have proved very difficult. So what could happen tonight is we could have some sort of a failure where things get even more muddled. We could tread water where nothing gets clearer. Maybe it would be entertaining, maybe it wouldn't. But best case scenario is that we figure out how to make sense of things that have gotten in our way before. And if that happens, then you all will leave here. And as you will have something to say about it and what we have... Wait, bear with me. Let me backtrack to that beginning of that sentence. I'm going to really backtrack. Maybe it would be entertaining. Maybe it wouldn't. But best case scenario is that we figure it out how to make sense of things that have gotten in our way before. And if that happens, then you all will leave here. And as you talk in your various networks, you will have something to say about in what way we upgraded our software so that we could talk more deeply about difficult issues. So to that end, we ask that you not film tonight's discussion and broadcast it online. It's not that we want to hide this. In fact, we encourage you to discuss it, but we would like to have all of us feel maximally free to speak here, to try out positions that we haven't tried out before, in the hopes that we can get somewhere new. All right, so, and then there's applause. I think with that, we will just put Sam and Jordan to it and see if we can head toward discussions that have proved difficult in the past. Sam, Jordan, and then they walk in, and they start. And so it's everyone's excited, so it's kind of cool. So, I just think this is absolutely fascinating, and it so has me intrigued that I'm gonna break all of this down and talk through this stuff, and because I want to really be able to engage in this, like is kind of invited. You sense throughout these discussions that people are invited to be a part of it. They're encouraging people to think about these things, to talk about it, and I think it would benefit all of us to engage on our own levels, where we would weigh in what we think, trying to be while leaving bias out of it and really listening to our counterparts, because this thing is filled with thought-provoking things, and things that need to be answered as well. So I'm gonna forgive any pauses here a little bit, because it doesn't mean the video's just stopping or ending. I might be pausing on occasion here, so just bear with me. I agree. This creates in all of us a responsibility. It just in the sense that we have a responsibility to our people around us in our communities and societies in the world. but I know of what Brett's talking about here. He's asking that people just be fair and allow for this discussion. I just thought that was so interesting, and that's a good thing. Nothing wrong with that. I might get back to more of that later. So this is where it begins to get interesting for me with what Brett says in particular. We are at a critical point in history, a very unique, fascinating point. I guess every point in history has not been lived in before, so this, goes without saying to some degree, but the getting to the point of where the systems that have helped us make sense of things are breaking down. University systems are breaking down, that's absolutely for sure. And those are the institutions that are training the young minds of the world, training and forming young, impressionable minds that have paid boatloads often to be there, that go in debt for years later, often. So there is this sense of, I need to absorb what I'm being taught. University systems absolutely breaking down. I super appreciate that he said that. Journalism is breaking down. Oh my goodness. It's almost as if in journalism, just this whole side taking and the punishment and reward thing, the ridiculousness of that is playing out in our world is just really seeming to flow freely through journalism, but not in the way that journalism usually was a thing to have truths flow through. It's just absolutely crazy and needs and deserves attention. One of the ironic things about people kind of misbehaving, so to speak, or acting at odds with what they're supposed to be doing, is that it also draws a light and attention to things in a way that is its own cause and effect. I find it absolutely fascinating. So we have a network. I would love to know more from Bret what he means by that. The network. Which network? The network of people. It doesn't really matter, I suppose, but it's just more of a genuine curiosity. Network of people who are trying to make sense of it all in an alternative way. And he might even just be meaning all of us. That there's just people, but in case he doesn't, I just was curious. And being the odds at the moment. I love that people see what's happening, because I'm right here too. I see what's happening, and it's in case you were just humming along in life, doing your thing, whatever it is, what is happening right now literally has grabbed our attention, or I would hope, and I could dare say it ought to have grabbed our attention. I can't help but my mind keeps going to the idea of a fault line. I want to say that the sides of these things, or no, back up. I can't help but go back to good and evil here, truth and not truth. Let's say there's a fault line of things, and I'm going to put this in these terms for the moment. It helps me. It may help someone else. It may not. On the sides of two fault lines can be massive expanses of land masses and whatnot. The Earth's crust and whatever. A lot's going on above and below, but the fault line itself is a delineating line. There's really no problem with that. It's just a thing that is. On either side of a fault line, you've got a mass of something. And if we have philosophical lines of thinking, or good and evil, or you could put all kinds of things as in those places there. But whatever is going on, it makes me feel what is normally along one side of the fault line, and then the other, the opposing side, opposite side, rather, is getting a lot more tense. That tension, as with actual fault lines, having grown up in Southern California. The idea maybe just rings true with me, but it's all good. Fault lines are all well and good until the tension builds up, right? So That's what I feel like is happening in this world, in a sense. Not just in a literal, actual sense of land masses or forms or whatever you want to call it, but in a philosophical sense, and perhaps even in good and evil. Everything, I mean, it's just a crazy time. And I know that there's been crazy times in the past. I'm not discounting that for the sake of this argument or point. But things are bucking up against each other very, very hard. And even if you want to avoid that and looking at it, dealing with it, whatever, it is absolutely happening and you almost can't miss it. In my personal world, I see it very true. On the best of the days, I mean, with really reasonable people, I see this happening and it's a concern. So I wonder, when Bret says historical, he totally is not lying. I absolutely agree that this is historical. Because we're saying, hey, whatever is, and I think that this is inextricably, might not be the right word, linked to our cause. I think whatever is our cause is also powerful. The source, it's full of knowledge. And I think that it's trying to get our attention, and we can't deny it. And whatever, I am actually, at the risk of people that might know me to some degree here, at the risk of me acknowledging that I have a feeling that you might, don't run yet. Please do not run to what you think that my thought might be on that, because I'm really trying to be fair here. I'm trying to put that aside. I think that it just makes sense on a logical sense of what we do know. I don't think that what caused this universe could be less than what it has produced. It cannot. And I think that thing, and if I'm right, it would also make sense of this, but I think that this is kind of like a little bit of a shakeup, kind of like the idea of when an earthquake hits. No matter literally what you're doing, something's got your attention. It's just the earth at that point is shaking underneath your feet, something that feels very wrong. And I think that this is getting shaken up quite a bit. And that's true. Things that are historical, not necessarily always good. And I laugh too. That is a funny thing to say of Bret. And so things are proving difficult. It is an interesting thing too, and I think that some might not disagree with this, but that's quite a thing to say. So to say that we're observing this craziness or this insanity or this ludicrous junk that seems to be being engaged in by a lot of the public, that we're trying to make sense of it. It's kind of demanding that it is made sense of. That then we get down to the discussion. It's funny, the cause and effect right there. And Bret may not be meaning to present this way, but he literally jumps, or he doesn't necessarily, but this thing, these set of discussions and what ensues within them, because I have seen all four, it kind of jumps. This is the part of the laying out of the thing, is it not? He's saying we're existing in a moment where all the systems that have helped us make sense are breaking down. The universities, journalism. In essence, our input, what is being input into our brain, with a lot of morality being weighed in on all those levels too. Side taking, a lot going on. A lot of punishment and reward, a lot going on there. He's talking about this. And then speaks of a network of people trying to address it. So here's a problem, here's a cause. I mean, an effect of sorts. One of the smaller effects could be that we're going to try to make sense of this. Here's a problem, let's make sense of it. That's perfect, that's good. And then the hours and continents later, the weeks, the months later, we're talking about what? We're talking about religion, quite literally. We're talking about belief and a lack of. And nobody made them do this. They did this. And I'm just saying, I think that is a reflection of what is. And that sounds like it is obvious. But I'm talking about, I don't think it's an accident. No matter what side of things you're on, the truth, if we're trying to get truth and morality on our side, I think it is interesting because the ultimate arbiter of those things would necessarily always be driving that bus. That's just a thought I'd like to throw out there, weird and random as that is. Now, at the risk of sounding crazy, not really, but I just see people thinking, how did I jump here? Let me explain. I'm going by the clues. I'm going by symptoms, if you want to call it that. I think that whatever you're doing in life, whatever you're talking about, whatever you're writing a book about, having huge, massive discussions like these about, where people are spending tons of time and money and effort organizing their lives to be at these kinds of discussions, is that not fascinating? The people involved in these things, or even a journalist doing their job, or the powers that be, the highest powers of the world, guess what they try to utilize to get their points across often? Truth and facts and morality with logic and reason. And if they don't do that with anyone that's fair-minded, they will be pressured soon enough, or their failing arguments will pressure them soon enough to engage and look again at truth, morality, logic, and reason. What is good? What is not good? And here's why. It's kind of a tip of the hat to those things, to the source, to the cause of those things, because when you're trying to make a point to somebody who disagrees with you, you have things at your utility. You can utilize things that will help you get your point across, because we want to communicate things to people. I don't think, obviously, this is no accident. I'm just talking about what is right now. Because the reason why I think this is the way what is good and true and moral gets you one of the effects back to it, whatever it is. Again, I'm not weighing in on that right now at all. Honestly, not at all. This is to me and to anyone, as much as anybody ever, if there ever was, just all of us, for all time. Truth, morality, and logic and reason is trying to get us back to the source of those things. Ultimately, and we see, I think we are caught up in a life where we see a bunch of, it's like if you could back out into the universe and look in, there's a lot going on this planet that it's like a magnet back to itself of sorts, because it's trying to get people back to it, or at least have to face it. And guess what? Whatever that thing is gets to do that, because it would be the source or the cause. And so, see, therefore, I kind of start to do a tiny dipping into the philosophical things we're talking about and get off of the obvious that we would all agree on. So I just wanted to say that, bear with me if this makes any sense. And I love that Bret said it might make things feel more muddled, that we could have some sort of a failure. And I found that interesting, because I think that we're invested in our thoughts and ideas so much, right? We really hope. We can barely accuse anyone anymore of that, because we're all doing the same thing. It's not even a fair thing to say anymore of someone else. You're just saying this because you think you're right. Well, absolutely. That's where everyone's already at. So that's already true. Everyone is operating. And if you're not, where the things that keep you up at night, or the things that you questioning about, if you care about meaning, if you care about where we came from, if you care about meaning and what's the point of life, and if I would just say, please, please, this is a shakeup. These are fault lines that are rubbing up against each other, fault lines with pressure that's building, demanding our attention. You don't have to agree with me for it to be true. It could be true. It might not be true. But if it's true, nothing needs your agreement for it to be true. And it seems like it would explain what we're seeing. It's not just a typical disagreement. And I think that this discussion begins to touch on going into deeper areas. And I can sense the tiptoeing into it, because it's an honest admission of sorts that we're trying to get closer into these things. That's fair to me. So I just wanted to say that. Let me make sure before I get off of here. I don't think this will cut me off, but if it does, bear with me. Let me make sure there's nothing else I need to say. I want to talk about the parts that have proved difficult, where Bret says that network is not entirely in agreement with itself about some significant issues, and Sam and Jordan have some differences that have proved very difficult. When you have a position that begins to be proven very difficult, that's precisely when and obviously your attention is peaked at that point. Like, it's for a reason. I think that it's got our attention, and we tend to get really, like, feelings almost become involved some, we can't help but pay attention. This is where our ideas can break down, and this is what I guess I want to weigh in on. If your ideas break down, but you are very defiant, because we all are. I'm seeking as human beings how we can be prideful and defiant and have our issues, whatever, that we don't want to come down from. When you begin to see problems arise in ideologies and philosophies and frameworks, and especially if you begin to see tactics and fallacies engaged in, and we all know that those point to greater truths. If it contradicts your views, I almost feel like this would be a really good time in history to address that, because it's kind of like saying, couldn't some of what's happening in essence be, for people that you are diametrically opposed to, for instance, bear with me for a second here. For those that you disagree with, vehemently, even intensely disagree with. Oh gosh, don't want to lose my thought. If you have your own belief, dogmatic or not, but it could be that you have to be honest that your beliefs could be dogmatic. We all do. If you begin to engage in a way that is playing a trick with things, I want to just do a quick reminder that this is not like a sport so much, or it ought not to be a sport where tactics let you get to win. And I know that we already see that playing out in life. People try to sneak on things all the time. The loopholes of life are a perfect example. Loopholes. And it touches into people's morality sometimes as we engage in the loopholes so much. But we know that we have to do that. It doesn't mean that the thing is right. It means that you just think you're clever because you found a loophole. I think that it's time to really consider if the loopholes that are available to us in discussions like this are a good thing to engage in or not. I just wanted to add that. Even if you have a higher IQ, even if you genuinely are more knowledgeable, more clever, you don't get to have the higher moral ground if you don't actually have the higher moral ground. You don't get to force things through with an appearance of morality, or at least middle of the road. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just you don't get to force something true anymore unless it's actually true, without the kind of pushback that these guys are admitting is obviously there. It's kind of like cool, super cool, in the one sense that I think this is what draws the hordes of people, thousands of people, and then more after that. Because these not like the biggest topics of life, the most fascinating things. They're also, all the stakes are very high because we're so connected to our views. So before you go accusing someone else of holding tightly to their ideas, bear in mind that you be doing that too. We don't want to tend to let go to what we're almost most connected to, what makes sense of our lives that we're caught in. We're in this. We tend to think that meaning is helpful, and there's a lot of opposing views. This is like the total stating of the obvious. And it's okay that it might get more muddled. I think that it's okay that it might be a failure. I do think it's kind of a brave thing to go here, and I think that we should continue to. And I think in that process, get closer. Truths are everything, but we also hate them sometimes because they're everything. Like the truth of death, the truth of cancer, the truth of how someone hurt us, potentially. That hurts, and it hurts bad, but it's true. But to get past these things is what gets you to a good. It's still a good that a person that gets cancer and ultimately dies went to a doctor. It's still a good thing that they went to the doctor and the doctor tried to help them. But that at the beginning of the help, or the search for the help, was an admission of the truth, the undeniable truth. But in part of what we've been given with our very brains, with our very intellect, our capability to pump blood and breathe and all of these things, to consciously think through this stuff. Along with that has been given our free will. We're not forced, at least not at this point, like a plant is forced to do certain things or die. We're not. We have been given an extra gift in life to get to do this. So what a joy and a horror at times, because we have to face our own things. It's hard. So to that end, I applaud it. But what comes with it can become very difficult, because you can feel crushed a little bit. And you can feel a concern that your views might be getting stepped on, and that it's not just somehow getting a position of power onto your side. If you could just get enough funding, if we could just get enough power to make your view be able to be pushed through into a way that you get to believe that it's true. It doesn't work. There's been people in history that have tried to do this. It doesn't work. The truths of things and the morality of things remain. Hitler might be a good example of this. He believed something, a lot of things. He tried to get a lot of people. Oh my gosh, it's not, in a sense, it's not a good example, because I fear that people are going to think I'm applying it to someone in this scenario, and I'm not. Certainly not. Certainly not. And if it ever even was, it's certainly not at this stage. So just bear with me for because they brought up Auschwitz. They brought up all these things too. So you guys get where I'm coming from when I say this. So bear with me for the moment. You can have a very powerful entity that can be the massive, the utmost of the string pullers, the puppeteers of the planet, with more money amassed, with more power to execute anything you wanted. And guess what? You know what frustrates those folks? Truth. The things I spoke of before. Ultimate power, morality, truth, goodness. And guess what tries to... When you are in disagreement, so when Hitler is in disagreement with truth, goodness, morality, and good ideas and all these things, he bucked up against it. And it really has nothing ultimately to do with power, a human being's power. But we act like it does. And the reason, in the most basic of ways that I can word it, that I can see, is that we are not greater than our cause. We don't get to be. But dang it, are we wishing we were. We were given a level of power, of reason, of intellect to weigh in on that. This is incredible stuff, you guys, because is it an illusion of free will, or is it a gentle way of that thing saying, hey, you can come to it however you will, but I'm doing what I can to not force anyone's hand. No one's hand is being forced here. You're given free will to do what you want, but you get, like all of life, we get what comes with that. You don't get to supersede what comes with your decisions. This is so obviously true. So, Hitler, back to that example, he's gone down in history as one of the most, fill in the blank with all the bleep words you want, evil people in all of history. He engaged in ideas that failed him and was willing to go to his death and take his own life at the end. Cowardly. So he's one of the biggest cowards. These are the things that cowards do. Mass murdering people, or playing games with such ideas of that. That's what cowards do. When they want their idea to win, it's the ultimate bullying, the ultimate cheating to win, the ultimate cowardice. The ultimate strong thing to do is to face head on with all the cool things that you and I have been given, facing those things head on to access and get closer to what's going to basically, in essence, win anyway. And here's the thing, here's the kicker. If there's people on this planet right now that are in ownership, that are the closest of all of the people, either to what actually is, to having knowledge of it, or accepting whatever revelation they've been given, whoever those people are, it makes absolute sense to me that those people would be hated, because by default they're on a path that will not have to fight the greater powerful truths that are. They're closer to it. In other words, you can't fault them. You can't fault those people. You can't fault these guys. If Sam or Jordan are on that path, or Bret, or Douglas Murray, all these people, or anyone in their audience, anyone in the audience like myself, not like I'm leaving myself out of this, but say someone's close to that, you can't fault them if they're right in this, right? But the thing is, what I'm saying is, I'm talking of if they're actually right, where no tactics have no evil powers applied to people who are dissenters. It was a really crappy idea that the Holocaust happened. I'm kind of maybe going in circles, and maybe I'm not quite getting to the key, but I feel like I'm getting closer to also. I think we should all be inspired to do this to the point that we should be getting closer to. These things absolutely matter. They're critical. And they are what they are. And like a lot of, like, for instance, laws of nature, you don't have to line up with them, but you don't get to not line up with the laws of nature and win with your view over the other. You also can't make, so like that, would someone say that's just science? You can't make that kind of power apply in some other way, to contort it, to conform it, to have that same level of power, if it doesn't inherently have it. You can't force something, and you also ought not to be mad when another view maintains an ability to inherently, on its own merit, stick closer to the things that would kill or have a view self-destruct. You can't get mad at a person who you disagree with that holds a view that does not likewise have potential failures and things that just self-destruct within it, self-refuting. Therefore, we're all faced with a question, and I'll end with this. The ultimate question to each of us is, why am I holding on to a view then that has within it self-destructive merits? Why would I fight this thing? Why? To what end? Decades are flying by, you guys. A year, a day, a second, a minute. Here we go. We're on our way. Life is flying by. It's precious. No one would probably disagree with that. Most people, I mean, wouldn't. Therefore, what are you doing with the game? If your view, I'm saying that views automatically might be fails, but you just want, we act like it's a preference game or a want game, or like that we are the moral arbiters of things, that we're the ultimate truth creators and executors and the most powerful beings that ever lived, and we can't even recreate the organisms in which we actually are. We can't even recreate parts of it. And yet here we are. So I think it's a call to back down a bit and say, yikes, what is that thing? What is it? Let's be more honest and follow the things. I think because what continually comes to the top in almost all debates and discussions of any topic, all arguments, all debates, all discussions, you know what brings the hammer down? You want to be on the side of what is a true winning argument, no matter what. If you want to be on the side of a true winning argument of these matters of the most importance of all time, logic, reason, true morality and goodness, those things crush their opposites. And not because I say so, not because anyone says so. To those that would crush others where they are in disagreement, those people, the crushers, still lose. Hitler was absolutely on the losing side of his argument, even though all those people died and he thought he was winning for a while. He was absolutely 100%, 110% on the losing side of an argument, and is one of the greatest cowards of all time. Don't think that this can't be done. I'm not talking about like another Holocaust or Auschwitz type of thing, but in other circles, other schools of thought. Why do you think the tactics in journalism, the tactics on the campuses, why else do we see that kind of crap happening? That breakdown that Bret spoke of so perfectly. That was a perfect point to be made. So, back to this discussion then. We're all going back to our own networks. Some networks are trying, as we observe lately, Patreon. Am I saying that right? Yeah. Whatever the networks are, they're being all challenged, possibly by powers that be, to be cowards. You're going to be cowardly and shut down free speech? Why does free speech need to be felt? Why do some people feel the need to shut down free speech? And why do people fight for it so hard? The people that want to shut down free speech is because sometimes people actually have logical, fair, moral, valid points that carry through and reflect the greater thing. So the people that have to do it are either true cowards, and this is why you must fight it, or the greater powers that be that are exerting power have somewhere in their mix some really bad stuff. So anyway, that was long. Thank you so much. I appreciate you listening, and I will continue to talk more about these things, because I'm very passionate about it, and I think it matters for all of us, for all time, and can lend to things way beyond we have any idea of. So okay, thanks so much. I just want to say, just putting love out there to everybody. I think that love and peace and all things good are what prevail in the end. And I hope that we all will try to be thinking along those lines. Okay, take care. Thank you. Bye.